Hi, today we're talking about the new Sony Alpha A9 III. Now this is Sony's latest high-speed camera for professional sports photographers. You've probably heard the specifications already. There was a lot of excitement when it was launched because it's the first camera with a global shutter. But we're not going to talk about any of that today. Instead, what we're interested in is a load of tips and hacks to get the most out of the camera. So the first thing that you've got on this camera are new custom AF areas. Now this is something that you've seen before in Canon and Nikon cameras, but Sony hasn't had. And what it allows you to do is define specific rectangles within the frame where the camera will pick up subjects and just focus in that space. And this can be really useful if, for instance, you're looking at runners on a track, because the camera won't be distracted by anything anywhere else. And it's quite easy to set them. All you've got to do is select them as a focus area, and you use the dials to change the size and shape and the joystick to change the position. So the second thing, if you're used to using a Sony camera, you're probably used to seeing the subject outlined when it's detected by the camera's AF system. Now the A9 III doesn't do that by default, which can be a little bit confusing when you come to it for the first time, but you can turn it on. So to do this, you go into the menu, go to the AFMF section, subject recognition, and then this very badly titled Subject Recog from DISP option, and just turn it on. Now the next thing is that on the A9 III, Sony has recognised that you don't really want to be shooting at 120 frames per second all the time, so it lets you just step up to that rapid speed by pressing this new C5 button on the front of the camera. But you probably don't even want to use that for 120 frames per second a lot of the time. Now the good news is you can customise it, and you can set it to almost any shooting speed you want. So if you actually want to shoot normally at 20 frames per second and then boost to 60, you can do that. And the way you do this is by going into the menu, select the shooting menu, drive mode, and another terrible name, continuous shooting speed burst settings. And you change that to whatever number you like. Another thing that's nice to note is that you can set the camera up so that you'll get that higher speed by pressing the button, not holding it down. So you press the button once to speed up the camera and then again to slow it down. So the way you turn the toggle on is Setup, Operation, Customize, Custom Key Dial Settings. You go to tab 4, and then if you just move down one setting, you'll see that it goes to toggle. So another interesting feature on this camera is the star position on the drive mode dial. And what this lets you do, you can assign to this any of the drive mode settings which are available on the camera normally. So high speed, low speed, medium, bracketing, self timer, you can put any of those onto the star position. Now that at first sounds like it's a bit pointless because that's just replicating the functions you've already got on the dial. So where this gets useful is if you want to be able to change your speed settings very quickly while you're shooting, and you can do that by saving different speed settings onto your user menus on the mode dial. And then you can have two different setups on the star position. You can have one user menu setting set to say 20 frames per second, another one set to 120 frames a second. And then it's a very quick way of changing between the two just by using the dial. So another interesting feature that's new to Sony is pre-capture. Now we've seen this on a few other brands, but this is the first Sony camera that's come in on. And what this allows you to do is buffer frames continuously while you're half pressing the shutter button or holding down the AF button. And then when you fully press the shutter button, the camera will record those frames for a set period of time beforehand. And that way you can make up for your reaction time. You can record images from before you could actually react to an event happening in front of you. And that's really useful if you've got an unpredictable subject. And what you can do on the A9 III is set that for a wide range of times before you fully press the shutter. To do this, you go to shooting, drive mode, pre-capture settings, and just select the time you want. Now the other thing with pre-capture is that by default the camera is not set to allow you to turn it on and off quickly, and one thing which I like to do was just to be able to set that onto the C3 button. And to do this you go Setup, Operation, Customize, Custom Key Dial Set, Camera, Drive, Pre-capture. So if you used a Sony camera, you'll probably know that the menus are huge and complicated, and A really nice way around this is to identify the settings that you use most often and just assemble them into a My menu. On older Sony cameras, this used to be a really awkward process, but it's now much quicker. All you have to do when you've got the item selected in the menu, press the delete key, and this will give you the option to add that item to your My menu, and you can position it where you like. Now when you actually come to use the A9 III, what you'll very quickly find is you generate a huge number of image files, and going through them is a nightmare. So what you need to be able to do is rate those images that you like and quickly delete the ones you don't like. And here's a few tips about how to do that. So by default, Sony really doesn't make it easy for you to rate images, and I like to move that onto a button, and specifically the C1 button. And to do it, all you have to do is go to Setup, Operation Customise, Play Custom Key Setting, Play, Selection, Memo Rating, and then select the numbers of star ratings that you want to have available. Now one thing here is that Sony will by default mark the first frame in a burst with 1 star, so you might like to disable that so that you don't get confused about what's the start of a burst and what's an image you've rated. So another thing that's really nice to be able to do is to delete images quickly, and anyone who's used a Nikon will know that you can just press delete key twice and that gets rid of your pictures you don't want. Now you can set the A9 III to do this, and it's really quick and easy. You just simply go into the menu and go play, delete, and it gives you the option to delete the images just by double press the delete key. Another thing that A9 users won't have seen before, but which is on a whole load of recent Sony cameras, is a whole new set of touch buttons. And these are quite easy to get at. You toggle touch operation on and off probably by pressing the C4 button. And then all you have to do is swipe left and right across the back of the screen, and you can bring these new buttons up, and that's a very quick and easy way to change a load of secondary settings. And then to get rid of those buttons, you just swipe across them again. So another nice thing about the A9 III that wasn't widely reported at launch is actually the body has been redesigned, and specifically it's been widened. And now there is quite a lot more space between the grip and the lens mount. And that's great on a day like today. It's really cold, and with gloves on, I can just easily fit my fingers into that gap. On previous Sony cameras, that would just be quite a tight squeeze and a bit uncomfortable. So it's good to see that Sony engineers have made that change. And so our last hack for today is to get the camera to close the shutter when you power it off. Sony cameras are notoriously bad for getting dust on the sensor, so closing the shutter is a good way of just alleviating that a little bit. And here's the settings that you need to do to make that happen. So we go Setup, Setup Option, Anti-Dust Function, Curtain Wind Power Off, and then set that to on. So that's all for today. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can see more videos on our channel and see our full review on amateurphotographer.com.